Hey fam, I want you to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications. All right, y'all. I got to deal with last night on the show, we dealt with this whole issue with Reverend Barbara. We were talking about folks who pimp Dr. King. And we often hear people pimping Dr. King around his birthday and, of course, around the commemoration of his assassination. And so it didn't take long for somebody to show themselves in pimping Dr. King. Do y'all have Laura Ingraham's photo? Y'all could just go ahead and put it up in the graphic, because she is the latest person to pimp Dr. King. So last night, in her commentary, she had some things to say about the Democrats running for president, about the state of America, and she had some things to say about Dr. King and what he would be saying today in America. So I'm about to deconstruct Laura Ingraham's 2-minute and 37-second commentary. And trust me, I want y'all to pull out your pen and pad. I want you to pull out your iPad or your phone because class is about to be in session. And so y'all go ahead and hit play.
My friends, in an era of historically low unemployment, high home ownership, a small business growth, off the charts, real wage growth, finally, what message do these folks offer America's voters?
Stop. The line didn't take long. Now, you heard her talk about, home ownership and all of these things and how they are tremendous for America. Please go to my iPad. Folks, this is the website of NAREB, National Association of Real Estate Brokers. As you can see, let me increase this for y'all. African-American home ownership falls to a 50-year low. Now, let me explain to you. The Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968, and in the history of America, the home ownership rate for black people has never even hit 60%. Right now, it's around 41%. Low, extreme low. But see, in Laura's 2 degrees from an Ivy League institution, she says it's just great. It's rosy. Oh, do you remember when I read those unemployment numbers? Well, they dropped last month in March. There were 4 consecutive months where the black unemployment rate went up. So this was the first time it has dropped in 5 months. We call those facts, Laura. Press play.
Tell you what they offer: resentment, anger, division, and alienation. And these Democrats don't even acknowledge obvious gains, but you know why they won't? Because to do so would affirm that Trump's policies are working. Can't have that. Now remember, it did take a Republican president to pass criminal justice reform, which is already helping so many families across America.
Stop! Let me explain to y'all what actually happened with the First Step Act. First and foremost, it was initially going to be about prison reform, not criminal justice reform. The person who was fighting this the most was then Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The person in the United States Senate who was fighting it the most was the one who replaced him as the biggest opponent of criminal justice reform, Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. Now, some of you may ask, well, Roland, how would you know these things? Well, because in May of 2018, yours truly sat in the White House in a meeting for an hour with Jared Kushner. What you see is Jared Kushner's father was in prison. So the reality is Jared Kushner was big on the notion of prison reform. They knew they really couldn't get far because of the Republican forces who were against it. So here's what happened. you had Congressman Hakeem Jeffries from New York in the House who wanted more criminal justice reform. The bill that was actually passed in the United States House had severe limitations. You did have folks like Congressman Jim Clyburn and Congressman Cedric Richmond who voted for the bill in committee as well as when it went on the floor. Yet, when the bill went over to the Senate, you had Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat, and even Republican Chuck Grassley, who said there needs to be more in this bill and not just prison reform. Then you had Senator Cory Booker, who weighed in, Senator Kamala Harris, who weighed in. In order for it to actually go from being passed in the House to passed in the Senate said, if y'all want Democrat votes for this, you're going to have to put more criminal justice reform into this. That's when the negotiation began to take place. Senator Tom Cotton, he wanted to simply get rid of it. You had Senator Ted Cruz, who initially was opposing it as well. But when they realized they did not have the votes to kill it, then they said, okay, you know what? We got to let it through. Now, did Donald Trump sign the First Step Act? Yes. So when Laura says it took a Republican president, no, Laura, let me help you. It took Democrat votes in the House as well as the Senate for it to even get to Donald Trump's desk. Had it been left up to Donald Trump, it would have not been a criminal justice reform bill. It would have been a prison bill. Now, she also tried to act as if the previous president did nothing on criminal justice reform. Henry, go to my iPad. This, folks, is a piece from the Washington Post. Wesley Lowery was one of those writers. First and foremost, Obama became the first sitting president to actually visit a federal prison. Depending upon how Trump keeps acting, he might be the second, but he might be a resident. Now, if you actually read this particular piece they did, one of the things that Obama did was, first and foremost, in the first thing that he signed, okay, Obama signed the Fair Sentencing Act. What that was a law that was passed that reduced the disparities between powder and crack cocaine. That was signed into law in his second year in office. In addition to that, one of the things that happened was, you will see the chart that they have here, but one of the things that happened was, it was Attorney General Eric Holder who told prosecutors, yes, you do not have to go for the highest amount of years to put somebody in prison. Okay, that was Eric Holder. Guess what Jeff Sessions did, who Donald Trump picked to be his attorney general? He came in and said, oh, forget what Eric Holder said. I want you to go after the highest. So here you have Donald Trump on one hand taking credit for criminal justice reform, yet his attorney general is saying, no, we're going to go after higher sentences. Bob Barr is the replacement for Jeff Sessions. He has not rescinded any of those rules. Under Eric Holder, Attorney General for Obama, he said, we are not going to use private prisons. Jeff Sessions, under Trump, says, we will use private prisons. Barr has not rescinded that particular decision. So just so you understand, when Republicans want to claim credit for criminal justice reform, we're talking about a small piece of criminal justice reform that was forced on them as opposed to a much more expansive and broader bill. Not only that, Donald Trump has taken credit for the people who have been able to go home. Well, here's the problem with that. Henry, go to my iPad. This is a report from the Brennan Center for Justice. And they said 4 ways the Obama administration has advanced criminal justice reform. Number 1, increase commutations. Okay. Second, create a presidential commission that then studies mass incarceration. Donald Trump hasn't even gotten close to the number of commutations of Obama. Yes, after Kim Kardashian called upon him, he let one black woman out. I think there was another black woman who he let out. But the reality is, Donald Trump is not consistently every month commuting sentences of people who've been wrongfully convicted. The Brennan Center report also, Henry, back to my iPad. Number 3, end federal financial subsidization of mass incarceration. $3.8 billion that went to federal grants to states and cities. but a lot of those were not going to work. Obama said we have to change those things. Number 4, banning the box for federal employment. Those who did serve time in prison could not get themselves a job as a result of being in prison. On the federal level, they banned the box. Those are the things that Obama did under criminal justice reform. See, again, Laura does not want to establish the actual facts. She wants to shade the facts. Press play.
And meanwhile, the Democrats, what they basically do is offer more demonization of the police.
There must be accountability for the enforcement of the law. There must be accountability for use of force. And federal funds to local police departments and sheriff's departments must be tied to accountability.
But abolish ICE. Okay.
Come back to me.
Now,
here's the problem here. First, he didn't say abolish ICE. He said accountability of police departments. Under the Obama Department of Justice, they actually were pushing those departments when it came to consent decrees in Baltimore, in Cleveland, in Chicago. Yet, under Jeff Sessions, he gave repeated speeches where he said, we're going to pull back on consent decrees because they make the cops feel bad and it hurts their morale. And so we're not going to do that. That's what you have under Donald Trump. And in fact, Jeff Sessions tried to get rid of the consent decree in Baltimore that was agreed to by the police chief, agreed to by the mayor, but he said, we don't need it. The federal judge said, get the hell out of here, Elmer Fudd. We do need it, and it stayed in there. He fought the consent decree in Chicago, yet it was Attorney General Lisa Madigan of Illinois who said no, who sued, we are going to have a consent decree. So under Donald Trump's administration, they don't want consent decrees for police departments. They're not investigating police departments. And so Laura Ingraham does not want to admit that. She does not want to admit the wrongdoing of cops across this country because, see, for her, they praise and they laud cops, yet say nothing when cops do wrong. Press play.
you might not have thought that the Civil Rights Act was ever even passed more than 50 years ago. Or that black Americans have reached the highest levels of business, the law, medicine, entertainment, sports, pretty much every area of society.
Stop.
And that is a...
Now, she's praising, oh my goodness, a result of the Civil Rights Act and black people can get to do so many different things. Really, Laura? Y'all, all you had to do was type in black and wealth white gap. Henry, go to my iPad. This is from The Economist. The black-white wealth gap is unchanged after a half century. Laura was quoting the 1964 Civil Rights Act when, if you actually read the 64 Civil Rights Act, that wasn't dealing with a bunch of other stuff you're talking about, Laura. It was dealing with public accommodations. It was dealing with hotels. It was dealing with restaurants. Yes, black folks have always made money from singing. They simply couldn't walk through the front door of the hotels that they sold out, Laura. That's the difference. But the reality is we're still dealing with that. So, Laura, if you paint this wonderful picture of how things have been so great for black people, please explain to me how go back to my iPad, how the black-white wealth gap is unchained after a half century. Laura, go right ahead and read this story where they break down the Tulsa race riots. Break down where they break it down. Here they say the mean of black household wealth is $138,200. For whites, it is $933,700. See, you got to be living somewhere else if you somehow think, oh my God, everything is just so rosy for black people. See, this is why I need y'all to understand what's happening in the world of Fox News. White people see Beyonce. White people see LeBron. White people see Dwayne Wade and Gabrielle Union, and they see Oprah, and they see Tiger, and they say, oh my God, those blacks, they have just got it made. Yet, they say nothing with no black executives at CNN. They say nothing with fewer black law partners at major law firms in America today than it was 10 years ago. Right. A lower number of black Fortune 500 CEOs today than we had a decade ago. See, for them, look, y'all got y'all black president. Everything was wonderful. What is wrong with y'all complaining? Press play.
Very good thing. Watching and listening to this Democrat field kowtow to Al Sharpton makes it seem like America didn't even elect and then re-elect its first black president. But for the hardcore racial rabble-rousers, Obama's victories, remember, they were just baby steps. What they want now is full-on income confiscation meant to enforce equal outcomes, if not equal opportunity.
We're in the post-Obama generation. So we have already seen a black president. We've already seen a black first family. Now we want to know what it is going to mean. Symbolism is not enough now. It's substance. And if there's no substance, then we've gotten over the aura of the first.
Wow, pretty dismissive of Obama there. Today is the anniversary of the assassination of the Reverend Martin Luther.
Stop right there. I'm going to pick that one up in a second. But maybe spoke, so she said, oh, dismissive. No, it's not dismissive. It's facts. Laura, did criminal justice in America somehow change overnight because Thurgood Marshall became the first African-American Supreme Court justice? The answer is no. Did Virginia lose all of its racism and all of its past when Doug Wilder became the first black governor of Virginia? The answer is no. Did Massachusetts somehow heal its racial divide because Deval Patrick became the first black governor of Massachusetts? No. Did Cleveland change because Stokes became the first black mayor? Hatcher in Gary, Indiana, Maynard Jackson in Atlanta, Kurt Schmoke in Baltimore, Rice. I mean, we can go down. Black mayors in Baltimore and Seattle and Los Angeles, in Houston, and all across this country. And the reality is we still are electing first black mayors across this nation. Laura, seriously, 2 Ivy League degrees? What the hell were you doing in history class? What were you doing in sociology class? What were you doing at all? Were you reading? Were you studying? Or were you studying his story and not actual history? Now she gets to Dr. King. So let me bring this thing home. Press play.
Anniversary of the assassination of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. I was thinking, like, if he were alive today, I wonder what he'd think about such dismissive comments and about a Democrat Party that believes it can regain power by living in a constant state of protest or racial hatred and denial. And that's the angle.
Oh, Laura, by all means. Let me take you to April 3rd, 1968, when Dr. King gave his speech, the mountaintop speech. Let me help you out. Here's a book for you to read. It's called Martin Luther King's Biblical Epic, his final great speech by Keith D. Miller. See, in that particular speech, you mentioned what would Dr. King have to say about Democrats in a perpetual state of protest. In that speech, he was talking about protest. He was talking about fighting a particular system. He was talking about what we must do. Oh, Henry, please go to my iPad. Here's Dr. King saying, now we're going to march again. And we've got to march again in order to put the issue where it's supposed to be and force everybody to see that there are 1,300 of God's children here suffering, sometimes going hungry, going through dark and dreary nights, wondering how this thing is going to come out. That's the issue. Then he said, we aren't going to let any mace stop us. We are masters of in our nonviolent movement in disarming police forces. That's what he said. Then he goes later in the speech. He also says, commend the preachers and what they're involved. Then he says, Laura, now the other thing we'll have to do is this. Always anchor our external direct action with the power of economic withdrawal. That's what he said. Now, come on back. Now, here's the other piece. Y'all, Laura started her commentary by saying, Democrats, they want to sit here and take money. Then she quotes King. Let me help y'all out. Here's a book called The Guaranteed Income. This book is edited by Robert Theobald. This is the book where Dr. King got his perspective on the guaranteed income. Here is another book written by Dr. King. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? In this book, Dr. King said we need a guaranteed income in America. In this book, Dr. King talked about the check being stamped insufficient funds. In this book, Dr. King talked about what is required of America, because he said that America, frankly, had not done enough. It didn't cost much. In fact, Laura, let me actually quote Dr. King. Quote, the practical cost of change for the nation up to this point has been cheap. The limited reforms have been obtained at bargain rates. There are no expenses and no taxes are required for Negroes to share lunch counters, libraries, parks, hotels, and other facilities with whites. Even the psychological adjustment is far more formidable. Having exaggerated the emotional difficulties for decades, when demands for new conduct became inescapable, white Southerners may have trembled under the strain, but they did not collapse. See, earlier in your commentary, you actually said people act like the Civil Rights Act didn't happen. This book was written in 1967, 3 years after the Civil Rights Act of 1964, 2 years after the Voting Rights Act of 1965. King is talking about it did not cost America much. So, Laura, what exactly are you talking about? King lays out in this particular book where he said the real cost lies ahead. The stiffening of white resistance is a recognition of that fact. This is the same King who you just quoted. And in fact, when you quoted that same King, you then said exactly what it is he would say about today. Same King. A good many observers have remarked that if equality could come at once, the Negro would not be ready for it. I submit that the white American is even more unprepared. Lord, see, that's the King. See, if you're going to quote the King, then I say you quote the King. Don't ask what would King say today about what is happening with Democrats and Republicans. What you should do is go to the text and see what King actually said about these very issues. Because here he was in 1967 writing about the very issues of income inequality, writing about the millions being spent on war, on Vietnam War, writing about the lack of strong poverty programs. The same conversations that we're having today in 2019, Laura, King was talking about in 1967 and when he was killed in 1968. Let me also remind you that when he was killed April 4th, 1968, he was planning the Poor People's Campaign. Here is what King had to say about income and wealth in America, and this was posted last night by his daughter, Reverend Bernice King. Laura.
Through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And this is what we are faced with. And this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
To get our check. This is what King also wrote. The American racial revolution has been a revolution to get in rather than to overthrow. We want to share in the American economy, the housing market, the educational system, and the social opportunities. This goal itself indicates that a social change in America must be nonviolent. If one is in search of a better job, it does not help to burn down the factory. If one needs more adequate education, shooting the principal will not help. If housing is the goal, only building and construction will produce that end. To destroy anything personal property cannot bring us closer to the goal that we seek. Laura, he was talking about the riots in 1967, which the Kerner Commission report broke down, where they said there were two Americas, one white, one black. See, this is real simple, Laura. There's a reason why you're not going to invite this black man on your show. Because, see, unlike you, Keith Miller's book, I've read it. Where do we go from here? I've read it. King's book, Strength to Love, I read it. Why We Can't Wait, I read it. The Guaranteed Income, I've read it. So when I go on, I'm not talking about King in some interesting, weird sort of way, throwing out a question. I'm going to present you undeniable facts based upon what he said and what he preached. See, the problem is folks like you, Laura, with your 2 Ivy League degrees, somehow skipped over all these texts. I might be a Texas A&M graduate, may not be an Ivy League school, but I have the ability to actually read these books and others. But the problem is you want to present this very nice, wonderful, rosy white view of who King is, because what y'all want is for MLK to be that civil rights mascot that's a bobblehead who you put on the shelf and break out twice a year and go, that's Dr. King, nice and wonderful, and he was all about love, when in fact he was a radical. Theobald book, The Guaranteed Income, he lays it out. He said it's about the economic distribution in this country. So yes, Laura, you're absolutely right. When you say Democrats are talking about a redistribution of wealth in America away from the haves to the have-nots, that is exactly what King was talking about in 1963 at the March on Washington, and in 64 when he was in Birmingham, and in 65 when he was in Selma, and in 66 when he was in Chicago, and in 67 on April 4th, 1967, when he gave the Beyond Vietnam speech in Riverside, and when he went to Memphis to stand with sanitation workers. If you want to quote King, damn it, you better quote the real King, not the fake King like Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. You better quote Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the one who was at 16 went to Morehouse, the one who was raised by his mama and daddy, the one who went to Boston, the one who was in Montgomery. You better quote the King that we know and not the joker that y'all have somehow presented. Laura, you may have spent all those years getting an Ivy League education. I dare say you got more in this education in the past 15 minutes than you ever gotten with those 2 Ivy League degrees. You should ask for your money back. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. By going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com, you can make this possible.